Okay. All right. So we are in Sadi Tet. We are at the end of Sadi Tet. And so here's my thought, just to give people, either for you guys and for people who are watching, my thought process on this is that I kind of want to finish up the review of Sadi Tet today in some ways, even though we're going to finish it next week. For the reason that I'd like to be able to, for next week's Chazarah, focus on Birya when we get there. So, which I think is a really good topic. I think this is a really good and important topic as well. But just in order to be able to focus, I thought we'd do that. So let's see if we can fix that. We can do that properly. And I wanted to start today actually in the Beit Yosef, which is not usually where we start for Chazarah. But the reason is, I don't know if people remember, in the Beit Yosef, it's Seif Vav, in the Beit Yosef, or the post numbering of the Beit Yosef into Seifim. It's pretty far ways down, right? He's got like a Katav HaRambam beperek tetvav halachot machalot asurot. I'll get everything out, and then he's got another one, Masha Katav Rabbeinu bezeh b'shem harashba. Does people see that? The second one on that on Vav there. And then if you go quite a bit down on it, a little bit down, you get in the Shurat Dvorah version that a lot of us have, it's like towards the bottom of Reish Samech Gimel. It's like 3 lines up. Nim se'u shlosha dinim bevitul. I'll give people a minute to find it. Lexi had me read this in class, and I actually think it's really a good summary, even though it's just the Rashba he's quoting here. There's all the Rashba. It's not maybe the bottom line opinion necessarily, but a kind of a good summary of the different categories here of bitul. Like, can you do bitul, after the fact, after like the mixture has already happened and so forth. So can you do it with beyadayim? Jacob, you look like you haven't found it yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, still am using all the Torah, and it's just hard to.
Very fair. Can you do a control F?
Yeah, I can do that and then get up the Hebrew keyboard on another tab.
No problem. It starts Nim Seu Shlosha Dinim, unless of course their version is Nim Seu Gimel Dinim, which is also possible. And
wait, what's the first word?
Nim Seu.
Yeah.
Oh, Nim Seu.
I'll have Torah and Gimel Dinim there.
And it's Gimel and Al Torah?
Yeah.
Look at that. So
okay. I mean, someone else can start and I'll catch up.
Yeah, Yavni, why don't you read for us?
Sure. נמצאו ג' דינין בביטול האיסורים. הראשון, איסור תורה. אפילו שיעורו דרבנן, אף על פי שנפל לתוך היתר שאין בו שיעור לבטלו, אין מוסיפין עליו היתר כדי לבטלו, ואין צריך לומר שאין מערבין אותו בידיים כדי לבטלו. Should I stop and translate as I go, or
give us a little bit, just like another sentence here and there.
Okay.
Avar.
עבר וביטל, או שריבה עליו, אם בשוגג מותר, ואם במזיד אסור למי שנתבטל בעבורו.
Good.
So the first category is something that is asur midoraita, if it falls into heter that is less than 60 against it, or less than enough to battle it against it, then you can't add heter in order to battle it. And although more so, you can't like take a little bit of this isur and deliberately mix it into more than enough heter to battle it, in order to and if you did so, either of those two things, if you did it b'shogeg, then it is mutar to eat, and if you did it b'mezid, then it is asur for the person for whom it was done.
Exactly. Right. So we'll get an expansion of that deen in a little bit. But it's important to, probably people know this already, but I just want to review it, that there's kind of 2 applicable actions going on here. One is which we call is hosif or mosifim levatlo, right? Mosifim heter. So the mixture already happened, it's asur, and now you're adding to it. And the second version is that I actually just have an Isur there that I'm just gonna like intentionally put in to like I'm like, oh, I've got 60 eggs worth of soup, of kosher soup, and it would be great if I ate this little piece of bacon here, so I'm gonna throw it in my soup. And that's right, what he calls as me'arvin oto be'adayim. All right, so it's that I'm actually like literally starting out by intentionally be mevatel this thing. So okay, any questions or thoughts that far?
I just want the language of lemishenet batel ba'avuro. It's I assume it's intentional, right? That because there may be cases when the person who is doing that he doesn't do it for himself. I thought mostly that it would be forbidden even for the one who does it. So is it intentional?
We're going to get that. We're going to get this
Okay,
idea that it actually, the way it plays out is it's a sur both of the person who does it and the person for the intended target of the food, right?
So what does he mean here?
What is good here? He means, I think we're assuming that you're cooking for yourself in this case, right? Is the person it's intended. Yeah, so mishnit batel asuro, the person it's intended, and we'll get the expansion of maybe also the person who did it in the first place, right? It's a knas. Okay. We'd call it rabbinic knas at this point. Well, we'll get into the whole question of is this the Rabbanan or Doraita? This Isur, but just to say that again, right? The two restrictions the Rashba is talking about here is one is you can't, if it happened accidentally, you can't add to it, and if you can't even, and all the more so, you can't even intentionally be mevatel it, like put it in some a whole bunch of other permitted stuff in order to be mevatel. So all right, but that's all things for, and again, these are isurim deoraita. Even if the shear of bitul is derabanan. For instance, right, I drop a piece of pork into you got to do me, maybe no. I drop a piece of forbidden beef into permitted beef, right? Let's pretend it's lach balach, just make it easy for the moment here. And so it's mim b'mino. I know I have rov, I just don't have 60. Even then, I can't do it according to this, right? Because the shear, even though the shear is derabanan, the isur is deraita. Okay. All right, that's case one. Yavni, keep. Who's reading? Right, Yavni, you're reading.
I was reading, yeah.
Keep reading.
And the second one, איסור של דבריהם שיש לו עיקר מדאורייתא, שיש לו עיקר בדאורייתא, אין מערבין אותו בידיים כדי לבטלו, ואם עשה כן מזיד אסור, אבל אם נפל מעצמו ואין בהיתר כדי לבטלו, מרבה עליו ומבטלו. So the second category is an isur midoraita that has some essence, some like that is deoraita.
Isur derabanan, right?
Did I say yeah,
right?
Isur derabanan that has a root in. Thank you. Sorry. Then you can't like take a little bit of and add it into heter, and if you did so b'mezid, then it's forbidden. But if a little bit fell in, then but if it fell into heter that is, if it fell by itself into heter that is not enough to batal it, then you can add to the heter in order to batal it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, right, this is category two, which not all poskim make the distinction here between this and necessarily, but here we have something that is, its isur is derabanan, but it has a deoraita root to it. Potentially like an example might be chicken and milk, right? What might be an example here that's only derabanan, but that one's actually a hard one to always bring in because that one has it's actually, we have an idea that the rabbis were very harsh with that as if it were deraita. So maybe, not, but Yavni, do you have another example on top of your mind?
No, I don't know. It just seems like a sort of a tricky category. Like,
yeah.
It's
even more tricky because he's about to give an example. I think he gives that example was given before, but he's going to give an example of the third category, which I think there's a way to say that it does have an ikar deraita in some ways. So it's But it might be maybe also like Shuman Hagid would be another one, right? That is a derabanan isur, but has a root in deraita, right? Because Gidon Nasha is a deraita isur. Okay, give us category three.
איסור של דבריהם שאין לו עיקר מדאורייתא, כתרומה וחלת חוץ לארץ, מערבין ומבטלין אותם berov lechatchila. So yeah, so if it's a derabanan that doesn't have any root in deoraita, then and the examples are truma and chala outside of Israel, which like is interesting because anyway, I don't know that you would necessarily think that didn't have any root, but
Exactly. Yeah.
then you can even choose lechatchila to mix it in with היתר that will batal it. ויש אומרים שלא אמרו כן אלא בתרומות וחלת חוץ לארץ, אבל לא בשאר האיסורים, ויש לחוש לדבריהם. And there are those who say that it's davka those two examples for which you're allowed to lechatchila mix it into batalit, but anything else, even if it doesn't have a root in deoraita, then don't do it. And the Rashba says you should. That's a good way to keep.
Exactly, right. So for anything but truma and chala of chutz la'aretz, which are not, in the sense that they're not deraita, right? They don't have the root. The idea of chala and truma, of course, is deraita, but neither truma or chala chutz la'aretz does. They're mitzvot tulot be'aretz, right? And mitzvot, so there really is no mitzvah outside of the land. So potentially, according to this Rashba, I'm going to say the radical thing he would say is that I make my bread and I separate my challah. If I make enough bread that I have to separate challah. And what was that? You have any?
Yeah, go ahead. No.
Yeah, which is quite a bit. But although some people, I'm one of those who separates challah no matter what, just without a bracha. It's like a nice thing. There could be issues with that too, by the way. But and you could then take that challah and like stick it in like
stick a whole right back in
other bread. Yeah. And depending on how much you take of challah, right? Usually it's like 148 and all that, but it's you could do it and be mevatel it lechatchila. So according to I know it's really interesting. I do wonder, are they doing this right? Is that the way they do it? But right, truma, of course, right. Truma is not batel b'shishim, by the way. So but you could imagine. Ilana, you had something you want to say about that? Oh, you're still on mute.
No, only that I just did that 5 minutes ago, so it was funny. That's all.
You took challah, or you intentionally put
5 minutes ago before I got on the Zoom, so it was very.
Wait, and mixed it back in, or just that you took?
Yeah, but you didn't mix it back in, right? It's
in the garbage.
Yeah. I could imagine, I'm just thinking about this, and I might be wrong here. That right, so a trumat of chutzlars you could potentially give to a kohen who is tameh to eat, or challah chutzlars, right? You can give to kohen who's tameh. And so if they're like nervous about that fact, then you could like maybe combine this with the Rashba and be like, well, okay, I'm going to make you bread that has 60 parts of non-challah and 1 part of challah. No, challah is not also is 1 in 100, right? Is challah?
I was going to ask what's the...
Yeah, I think challah is 1 in 100. It's either 1 in 100 or 1 in 200. I apologize, I can't remember at the moment. But has enough the right ratio, and that you intentionally are mivatel and then give it to a kohen. Then you're covered all your bases. It's like so it's a fun halachic game you can play. Okay.
So I just want one question: is this is the Isur Shel Divrei Hem Sheish Lo Ikar B'Deoraita Rashbas Chidush, or is it?
I think it's his way to kind of. I don't remember if it's only him, of trying to come up with a compromise, if I remember correctly, between essentially the sources that say you can never do this and the Rambam, who like, and it's also places in the Gemara seems to not, if I'm so clear on it, but it's, because we definitely have, remember in Beitza, right, the origin of this in Beitza, which is the case of twigs falling into your oven on Yom Tov, right, the twigs are of course muksa. They weren't prepared for Yom Tov, and you can add other twigs to them. But then there's the Rav Ashi position, right, which says, but wait a second, this is davar sheyesh lo matirin. Sorry, davar sheyesh lo matirin, right? That they'll eventually become permitted, therefore they're never batel. And the answer that's given is, well, they're going to get burned up as opposed to an Isur that's in front of you. And it sounds like, so some people are like, well, the fact they're going to get burned up, it doesn't matter if it's Rav Ashi or anybody, that makes this whole category different. And if it's not going to get burned up, you cannot be mevatel lechatchila and Isur. And to other people say, no, I take the first answer of the Gemara. And, so this is like kind of a compromise position between them of like, oh yeah, for Isurim. And that is only for Isurim D'Rabbanan, if I remember correctly, in the case of Beitza, right? Again, because the twigs falling on Yom Tov into your oven are only asur de rabbanan to light, not deraita. So that's where I think the whole thing comes in the different readings of this. That was my all regular achat without thinking about it too much answer. So hopefully it's good. Yeah, exactly. I know. I think Jacob, that's a great point of like, right. Look, taking truma, taking challah can be really prohibitive for people who don't have food. This, by the way, there's a whole sugya. It's a few places of kedusha rishana, kitshal shatav lok, kitshal atid lavo. I don't know if people know this. It's in Megillah. It's in a few other ketubot. Right, this idea that when the Olei Bavel came back to Israel, they intentionally didn't re-sanctify portions of the land because taking truma and maser can be really problematic in terms of like taking people's food supplies away, and it was actually, it can be hurtful for the poor. So yeah, it's a good point. Okay, that was all my on one foot attempt to sound like I'm smart. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch, shall we? Let's. I mainly want to spend our time now reading Shulchan Aruch. We might do some Ber Hetev as well. Let's see, Jacob, you want to start? We're in Sadi Tet, Seif Hey in the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, let me just. Okay, so ein mevatlin asur lechat chila lafilu nafal l'til chater she'en bo shir levat lo ein mosifin olav heter kedei levat lo. So you can't mevatel in isur lechat chila, and even if it falls into heter that doesn't have enough to invalidate, you can't add more heter in order to invalidate it. Avar vitlo osiribalav im b'shogeg mutar v'im b'mezid asor lamivatel atzmo im shlo v'chein shenit batel b'shvilo. So if it happened that he vateled it, or creased on it, the heter, if it was the shogeg, mutar, if the mazid, a sore to do it for himself, if it's for him, and that's if he's doing it for someone else.
Great.
And I didn't translate shogeg and mazid because I know there's discussion about that in this context.
Yeah, I know. I think it's good to not translate shogeg and mazid here. Even though we're here to get a bottom line halacha. Good. Let's see how we do on time. I want to look at three pieces in the Ber Hetev before we go on to the Ramah here. Actually, no, if you're fair, finish up. You can.
Ulashar kol adam mutar.
Yes, exactly. That's all I care about.
Yeah, and it's permissible for any other person.
So great. Good. Let's. I want to do a little Ber Hetev on this, just to give us some of the Nosei Kelim. Maybe Alice, you'll start out Ber Hetev Chet.
Okay. לכתחילה, so אין מבטלין איסור לכתחילה. כתב השח, ויש אומרים דאסור לבטלו מדאורייתא. מיהו בדיעבד לכולי עמא דינו, כמו שכתב המחבר, אחר כך עד כאן לשונו. So it's forbidden to be מבטל איסור לכתחילה, and the Shach wrote that there are those who say that it's isur deoraita, it's asur levatel deoraita, but if it happens b'diavad, so everybody agrees with the mechaber, meaning what he says, like if it fell there, if it happened like accidentally b'shogeg, so it's mutar. That's our understanding.
Exactly. Yeah.
And do we actually? I also wanted to ask that about the mechaber. So if it's en mevatlin isur lechatchila, we are sure that they talk about isur de rabbanan, or
Well, we're going to take him at his word for the moment and not differentiate. I think we're going to get to that later, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So yeah, but
okay. וכתב בתז דבסימן פ"ד סעיף ג' או סימן ג'
I think it is there, yeah, but
י"ג, right, סעיף י"ג מבואר דאם אין כוונתו רק לדבר אחר כגון לתקן הדבש מותר. So the Taz wrote Siman Peidalet, Siman Yudgimel, so that it's explained that if he intended only ledavar acher, like some other thing, like to make a tikkun of dvash. So I don't know what it really means here.
But here's I think what he's getting. This is actually an incredible kula. Is if you're not being mevatel, right? Your intention isn't to do bitul, right? You drop something asur into something, and like you're in the middle of cooking, you haven't added all the ingredients yet, right? That's the reason you're batel, right? Is you're why? Like I'll make an example. You have a soup stock, you haven't poured it in yet. You're frying up some onions and some garlic and some other good stuff to like then add the soup stock to it afterwards, right? And an Isur falls in there. Your intention isn't, to. So it sounds like from here, even though you know that the thing is in there, right? You're like, I'm not doing this to beetle. I'm doing it to finish my soup, right? You put the soup stock in and it's batel. That's mutar, right? At that point, according to this task. Which is a pretty radical. I don't know if it's radical, but it adds a mode of leniency where I didn't pour in the soup stock because I was like, oh, I have a chance to batel this. I poured in the soup stock because that was the step I was going to take anyway to make these onions.
So the kegon letaken hadvash means really, let's say, make it less sweet. For example, if it's really sweet. So I just, got it. Okay. So then it's mutar. Okay, it's interesting. ובסימן קל"ז סעיף ב' כתבתי דהיינו דווקא באם אי אפשר בעניין אחר. So what Beretev wrote, so it's only if it's not possible to, I'm not sure I understand it. It's not possible to do it differently, let's say, making it less sweet in our case, or
exactly, unless it's only when that was the only way to do it, right? If there was another way you could have done it, and you're like, oh, I'm going to take advantage of this fact now, then that's a problem. But I shouldn't add you taking advantage. If you should, in other words, you should try to avoid doing this if you can, right? You dropped into heter, it's not batel. You were already about to add a bunch more heter to make the heter, the initial heter, good, right? But if you can do it another way, do it another way, right? Because but if there's no other way, then you're allowed to do it.
If you can do what?
If you can finish your in the way that in a way that isn't like, I don't know, maybe like I have another set of onions cooking somewhere else, and I can do it that way, or but I actually don't know the exact. I didn't look at the Kufla Mazayin piece, so maybe I should, to see if he gives an example there. But there could be cases where you could maybe separate it out, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure. Okay, good questions. But let's do the next Beratev. Alana, you want to take it? It's Beratev Tet Avar. Oh, and you're on mute right now, so you might be saying great stuff. But
sorry. Okay, Avar and Perush Shazarak Isur Mu'at Letoch Heter Merubeh Sheyesh Shishim Negdo O Shanafal Me'atzmo Le'ein Shishim Beheter Ela Sheriba Achar Kach. So what is this B'diavad case that we're talking about, where he does the bitul? It's when he either put a little bit of isur into a lot of heter, like he put the isur himself into the heter, so that there was shishim heter to batal the isur, or the isur itself fell by itself into something that didn't quite have enough to batal it, and then he just added enough. Yeah, he added more. Rebut.
These are the two categories the Rashba referred to as like me'arev, right? That you me'arev be'adayim. is the first case that you intentionally are putting in, and the second case is it nafal, and then you are mosif alav afterwards, right? In both cases, you have been a var as far as the Shulchan Aruch is concerned, right? But good. That was short. So read the next one too. Bishvilo.
Okay. Hold on one sec. Okay, yeah, bishvilo. Where are we in the?
This is that it's a sur
Oh,
for
v'chein l'mishani patel bishvilo.
exactly.
Right. It's also asur to the person for whom the bitul was done, not just to the one who did the bitul himself. Right.
Yeah. So
Okay.
actually, you know what? Let's actually skip down a little bit. I'm just thinking about time. Towards the end of it, it says bechatav hataz. I don't know if people see that.
1 second.
It's like it's towards the very end. It's like the second to the last line for me.
Sorry. Oh yeah, I see it. Okay.
Everybody else see it? Let's see if I get some thumbs there. It's I've got 3 of 4. This is good. You got it? Okay. V'chatav hataz. Go for it.
וכתב התז, דאם טעה בדין, וסבר שמותר לבטל האיסור, מקרי שוגג. וראיה משבת, פרק כלל גדול במתניתין, דאם שכח שיש איסור מלאכה בזה, אף על גב שיודע שהיום שבת, מקרי שוגג. הכי נמי דקבתי, וכן איתה מפורש בתוספות, hold on, where that goes? בבחורות דף כ"ג, דיבור המתחיל סבר וכולי. Okay, so the Taz says that if his what constitutes shogeg, it's also shogeg if he didn't know what the halacha was. He made a mistake about the halacha, and he thought actually you are allowed to levatel an isur, right? It's like it's like when like you forget that you can't turn on lights on Shabbat, for example, exactly. Right? Like that's the parallel. So that's also called shogeg, and he brings this example from a parak of Mishnah parak in the Mishnah and Shabbat, that if he forgot that there's if he forgot that Shabbat, wait, that's the day you can't do melacha, I completely forgot about that aspect of Shabbat. I guess then even though he knew it was Shabbat, he just forgot that there was this Isur melacha on this particular day. Then that's also called shogeg.
Yeah. Right. This is the Mishnah, I'll say famous. Famous means I've read this Mishnah before, but and I know it well, right? But the Mishnah that gets into, and this is where we get into the different malachot in the next Mishnah, right, of Shabbat, is the idea that if you did one malacha several times versus you did different malachot, how many times you obligated for a chatat, and what's considered shogeg and what's considered mezid on Shabbat. Right. And shogeg, one of the categories, I know it's Shabbat. I know that it's asur to do certain things on Shabbat. I just forgot that this was one of those things, right? So it's it's quite, and he's got a Tosfot tobacco. But it's like I think this is a major. The reason I was very interested in this Ber Hetev here was, right. I can imagine if someone comes and asks you and they said, I dropped some non-kosher stuff into my kosher soup. I use a lot of soups here, but I like soup. And then I was like, oh, what do I do? How do I fix it? I was like, oh, I just added to it. And then I decided to call you to see if that was okay. Right. And you're like, oh, you thought that was mutar? Okay. That was shogeg. Right. You're good to go according to this Taz. So, this can be a real thing here. But of course you might want to tell them not to do that again.
Don't do it again.
Okay, good. Any questions on that so far? All right. I want to keep going in this seif. We've got the Haggah. So we haven't done that yet. Let's see. Alani, Jacob, can you give us the Haggah v'davka shnit arev yavesh be'yavesh? And you're on mute now.
Yeah. The davka shnit arev yavesh be'yavesh. O afilu lach b'lach l'man damar shein omrim bo chaticha nas nevela kedel el siman Zaribat. Val chaticha bala isor lo mihani shinito safe achar kacha heter de hamrinam be chaticha naset nevela. So this is specifically when like yavesh when that was a mixture, or even lach belach for one who says that it isn't like lach balach. We don't say chaticha na'aseh nevela as established in Siman Sadibat, but chaticha that absorbs something from bit in, it's not one of these that we're talking about what like it absorbed heter after, or like heter was added afterward, because in this case chaticha na'aseh nevela.
Exactly.
V'yesh omrim dafilu b'makom dela amrinan chaticha na'aseh nevela lo me'ane haheter levatel ela im nitosef kodem shenoda hatarovot. Aval im noda hatarovet kodem lo me'ane mash nitosef achar kach. And there are those that say that even in a place that we don't, or a case that we don't say chaticha na'aseh nevela, it's not something that like you can add heter to mevatel it, unless you add it before you know that this mixture has happened. That would make it asur. But yeah, but if you know it before, you can't add.
Exactly, right? Even if you don't think Hanan B'Shar Yisurim, according to the Ramah here, right? If once you knew that this thing happened, then you can't do it, right? So it's or not as a source. Sorry, it's not effective. It doesn't work to be batel at this point.
Yeah.
Yavni, you're looking at it like this something very weird. You might be. You're on mute.
I'm trying to remember if we saw this opinion anywhere besides here, but
I don't think it was in, I think, the Darchei Moshe, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I think it was. That I remember it from the Ramah, not the Darchei Moshe. But it's what happens when you read
based
ahead.
on what is this based, like what is the idea based on? I'm trying to
This is a great question. If I remember correctly, let's actually look.
Because the Darchei Moshe was mostly talking about Hanan, the issues of Hanan, right?
Yeah, I remember he brought up two possibilities of how you, even if you say Hanan, you can say this, right? Maybe if you didn't know, you didn't know in the meantime, that was one of his ideas. And what was his other one? That was the one he liked, was that you didn't know about it. That was one he liked, if I remember correctly. So, and his other one was that maybe you don't say Hanan if it's b'shogeg. That was his other possibility, which he kind of rejected.
Right. Yeah. The first was right. First one was that he listed was about shogeg, but then he liked it better that it was about knowing about it. And then the last one he said is maybe it has to do with the lach balach versus lach b'yavesh issue.
Exactly.
But in any case, he was talking about it as like the issue being Hanan. And here he's saying all of a sudden, even if you don't have Hanan. So
then nonetheless, it's not effective. Yeah, if you know in between. So, which might be a way. I mean, this is a very kind of Ravalisha answer, right? It might be a way of saying that everyone really holds Hanan like me, and it's just some of them just don't hold it if it's if you didn't know Bain time. That's one way to approach this. Yeah,
but he was saying himself that there are cases where you don't hold Hanan, like lach balach. Presumably that would fall into this category too.
Potentially, yes. No, lach balach still has right. That's why he says here, right? A few lach balach leman demar she'eno min bo chaticha na'aseh nevela.
Right. So there he's presenting as a positive opinion that Hanan only applies to lach b'yavesh.
Exactly. Yeah. So this, by the way, the Shach takes him on here. We're not going to jump into it today. I'm hoping that we're going to do that next week in Shir. So I'm going to save it. But that he's like, actually, look, maybe you have to read the beginning of Yud Bet and the Ber Hatev just to get the very beginning of this.
נבילה, כתב השחד לכאורה קשה מה עניין זה לחנן, דאפילו למאן דאמר דלא אמרינן חנן בשאר איסורים, מכל מקום חתיכה שבעלה האיסור ונתווסף עליה היתר, אחר כך החתיכה עצמה נשארה באיסוריה. כמו שכתבו כל הפוסקים, ראש סימן ק"י, שהאיסור שבה אינו נפלט לגמרי, אלא הרב עתי לאשמואינה, אוקיי,
Yeah.
So he's saying it's Hanan. Hanan would only mean that it would make the whole thing asul, but you would still have the problem with the piece itself or the
Exactly.
whatever itself.
Yeah, that's move on may love. Of course, that you can't. That piece is always going to be asur. You can't fix that piece, right? Because it's and the reason being is we don't assume all of the isur went out of it.
Right.
So, all right, and actually finish up this ber hetev. This could be helpful. Ela harav
Ela harav ati lashmuinan. Harav the Rama, right?
Yeah, exactly.
ati lashmuinan דחתיכה שבלה איסור דחתיכה שבלה איסור ונתווסף אחר כך היתר, אפילו התוספת אסור, כי ליקה 60 נגד כל החתיכה. אבל אם ריבה עליו בשוגג נגד כל מה שנעשה נבלה, אפילו בבשר בחלב, בלח, הכל מותר. אבל בחתיכה שבלעה איסור, אפילו ריבה עליו 60 נגד כל החתיכה, נאסרה החתיכה עצמה באיסורה. או נשארה החתיכה עצמה ואיסורה, וכתב עוד, right, so the point is, he's saying he's being even more machir, saying even the stuff that the heter that got added, even if it was, or maybe not, the heter that got added on becomes asur as well, and that's the point he's making. But even if you add 60 against it, then surely the chaticha itself stays asur.
Yeah, even if a shogeg, right? You can have maybe a case in shogeg vitlach belach. Then if you added 60, then it works. If 60 against the entire piece, right? Like if the piece itself never loses its isur status at that point. So, which is an important point to remember, right? This is I drop a piece of something that is bolea isur into my soup, right? You have to get rid of the piece at the end of it, unless the piece melts into it, right? That's the one possibility. We never say that like the flavor went out of that piece. This is completely and into the soup and was batel. That we never claim. Which is, by the way, back into the Afshar Sochto dispute is what that's really going into, right? Okay, good. Hopefully that was somewhat helpful. Yeah. Let's see. I want to do any questions there? There is one Ber Hetev that actually, maybe we'll circle back on this next week. It may, in Shir, I'll bring it up. It may answer the question I had last week about why don't I have to worry for Chazer V'nei, or about like, all the stuff that I bought from that was, OU from the factory, that little things got added into it. I'm going to add the same thing and it's going to be mean vimino. It's going to find each other. Anyway, but I want to go on with Vav in the Shulchan Aruch, just as a time thing. Yavni, you just read. Alish and Alana switched places on my computer. Very confusing.
I got disconnected for a while, but
that's fine. I'm going to keep you my old order though. Alish, you get to read Vav in the Shulchan Aruch.
איסור של דבריהן אין מערבין אותו בידיים כדי לבטלו, ואם עשכן במזיד אסור. אבל אם נפל מעצמו ואין בהתר כדי לבטלו, מרבה עליו ומבטלו. Okay, so that's the position we already saw in Rashba. So the Isur, which is Isur de Rabbanan, we don't, lechatchila, we don't add, so would Me'arvin be the same Me'arvin as before here, really added into heter stuff?
Yeah, this is when you have 60 of heter like sitting next to it, against it, and you throw it in there intentionally, right? You're like, I have this Isur of Zivraham, I'm going to be Mevatel it.
Okay, so it's the same. Right, so if somebody did it, Bemezit, it's forbidden, but if it fell from itself and there is not in the heter Gdei Levatlo, so we can add some more, and the volume is bigger, and it's Batel Bashishim.
Great. What's the difference between this and the Rashba?
I'm looking at it again. So we don't do it intentionally. So it's right. So there is no distinction between the Isur Divrei Hen Shesh Lo Ika Deoraita. There is just Isur Shel Divrei Hen, but he says that we don't do it intentionally. I think the lack of the distinction. And also Rashba says that if it's Isur Shel Divrei Hen Mamash, we do it lechatchila, right?
Exactly. But remember, the end of the Rashba said that may only apply to chala and truma chutz la'aretz. And so this is actually kind of the final position of the Rashba. He says v'yesh lachosh l'divreihem, right? So he ignores the Rashba himself semi ignores his distinction, or wants to semi ignore it, except for the chala and the truma examples of chutz la'aretz, and therefore he doesn't distinguish between isur d'Rabbanan sheyesh lo ikar d'oraita or shorsh d'oraita versus ones that don't. That's the difference. So there's never a permissibility in this world of me'arvino to bi'adayim. Right. That's the difference.
Right. Lechatchila.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Before we get to the Haggah, were there any questions about this piece in the Shulchan? I know we didn't see this one in class, so it's maybe. I wanted to look at the Ber Hetev Yud Dalid, partially because it's interesting and partially because it's the right month to be reading this one, as you will see. It's Kislev. By the way, I should say this over and over again in this class. I'm giving you guys material that you haven't necessarily seen ahead of time, so I really appreciate your openness to like being learners here. But then hopefully we create the right atmosphere here at Yashrut that people don't feel nervous about that fact that it's okay to mess up. Although you guys never do mess up, so it's okay.
We do. I do. Okay.
But Ber Hetev Yud Dayin, right? Yud Dalid. I'm gonna mess up. Where he says that if it fell from its own, right, and you don't have enough to batel it, you can then add to it to emivatlo. Alana, can you read Ber Hetev Yud Dalid Marbeh?
Yes, you just have to make sure that if you mess up, there are another 60 people who aren't going to mess up in the share with you, right?
Exactly. Yes. But I don't know if anyone's ever done this, but if you're laning and it's one of those aliyahs where you just like, I know I'm going to mess up this piece. You're like, you hope the laners that come before you, like one of them makes a mistake too. No, you never hope that, but I have. I have hoped that a few times in my life. So it's like maybe I won't be the worst laner. So.
Okay. Marbeh. Hiksha hashach be'orach chaim siman taf reish ein zayin katav ha'mechaber demutar hashemen shebener Chanukah shenitarev b'shemen acher ve'ein bo shishim levatel demotar hashemen shebener Chanukah.
Yeah, it's motar. Yeah, moshar, the remaining shemen.
Okay, motar hashemen shebener Chanukah shenitarev b'shemen acher ve'ein bo shishim levatel. Yesh mi she'omer she'en lahosif alav levatlo ad kan lashono. V'harei ner Chanukah eino ela midrabanan v'dochak lechalek dehatam kevan shehuksa lemitzvato chamir tvei v'tzarich yun ad kan lashon hashach.
I have Ad Kan Lo Shano, but yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes.
That's okay. No, you're right. It's Ad Kan Lo Shano. We'll stop there. I just want to bring this up.
Wait, I'm sorry. Motar Hashemen.
Yeah.
Is like, you're not allowed to use the shemen of Ner Chanukah. That's the idea. So if there's a little bit of shemen left over, and it gets mixed up with, so that shemen is Isur shemen. You can't, Ein Lahishta Mishpa. But then there's it gets mixed up with other mutar shemen. But not enough, right? There isn't 60 times that Isur shemen. Then there are those who say that you're not allowed to do bitol on that shemen, do bitol on the remaining Chanukah shemen.
Exactly.
But Ner Chanukah is only a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, right? Of course, and dafka l'chalek dehatam. That maybe of
his it's essentially saying you could maybe answer this, but it's a pretty tough it's a difficult answer to give, right? So to make this
Because
distinction.
we're always more chamor with something that was set aside for a particular mitzvah.
Yeah. So maybe that's the case of, even though you normally could do this, that you can't do it.
There's reason to be machmir here, even though it's Rabbanan.
Yeah. But he's like, I don't like that answer, but I'm willing to, throw it out there. So there's another piece that says, well, maybe the Hanukkah is Yeshlo Matirin, but the Ner Hanukkah, right? Because after the Chag, it's no longer Moksa Chag, right? People jump me for calling Hanukkah Chag. That Tzitz Eliezer calls it that in one tshuva. Deal with it. But the problem is that Yeshlo Matirin there, it wouldn't be even bitul, but there is no bitul on Devar Yeshlo Matirin until it becomes mutar. And so therefore this wouldn't even be a suggestion that would.
But is he saying after the Chag, or is he saying because next year you could use it for Hanukkah again?
Oh, I think after Hanukkah, the Shemen Hanukkah becomes mutar. Yeah. So same thing like with Sukkot, right? The lulav and etrog become mutar after Chag, right? Things that are muksal Chag, after Chag is over, become mutar. But I'm pretty sure about that. I seem to remember that reading that in the Chai Adam a few years ago. So yeah, I'll stick with that opinion. So,
sorry, I didn't know if you said this. What is the Mem Aleph?
Magen Avraham.
Magen Avraham.
Magen Avraham. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's the Magen Avraham tries to make we won't go into it, but he tries to claim that this is Devar Sheyesh Lo Matirin, and they don't. The Beratev doesn't like that explanation. Essentially,
the Magen Avraham is one of the commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch on Orach Chaim, not here in Yoredah. That's what
exactly. Yeah, that's what you're explaining to us, Yavni, right? That's it. Yeah.
What?
You're explaining that to us. Yeah.
Yeah. Just yeah.
But okay, Tov. Let's do the Ramah now. Here and oh wow, I've taken a lot of your time. I'm sorry, but hopefully we've gotten something good. Alish, take the. Oh no, Alish, you read already. We're back to Jacob. Jacob, take the Ramah v'yesh omrim.
V'yesh omrim de'in levatel isor d'Rabbanan o lehosif alav kamo b'isor d'oraita. So there are those that say that we don't vatel isor d'Rabbanan or add on to it, as the case with isor d'oraita. L'chei noagin ve'in l'sanot
yeah. Then he quotes a bunch of people, right?
Yeah. Isor shenit batel kigon chaya shishim kenegdo v'nitasif bo ar kach min ha'isor harishon chozer v'neor v'nasar lo shna min minov lo shna min b'sheino mino lo shna yaves lo shna lach lo shna noda bin time olono noda bin time. Okay. Good. So, and this is how we hold this idea of like Isser Rabbanan and being like Isser Doraita in terms of Vatel. And we can't change an Isser that was invalidated.
Oh, Loshna, no, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't, there's no distinction between, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
For example, if it had 60 opposite it and then added more of the first Isser and then like went back and stirred and made it forbidden again.
Oh no! Here, let me. I'm gonna back up. Let me help you out here if that's okay.
Yeah.
So sorry, right, Isur Shnit Batel, right? So if you have an Isur that was Batel, you drop, one piece of Isur.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So there was 60 against it, and then another piece of that same Isur comes in, right? So you might have said the Havamina is, well, that first Isur was Batel, so it's no problem. Now I do Bitul on the second one. Right? Yeah. It's Choser v'neor. The Isur reawakens, right?
Okay, got it. Yeah, I think I got confused with the punctuation because of the quote and yeah. Look, and it's not a difference if it's me no or not me or me b'she'eno me no. No difference if it's yavesh or lach. The difference if I guess that this was a tarova that was asur.
Yeah, you didn't realize. Yeah, you didn't realize the mixture. You didn't.
Right.
It doesn't matter. So
okay. Yeah. So because I chalav shenafal mayim v'nit batel b'shishim v'achar kach nefal min hamayim l'kdir shel basar mutar afal pish im basar shishim neged hachalav jarei nit batel b'mayim v'chol kayotze basar. Okay, so if a kazayit of chalav fell into water and was batel b'shishim, and after it fell from the water into tier of a pot of meat, it's permissible, even though the meat might not have 60 against the milk, since it was already invalidated in water, and then like anything that we could extrapolate from this applies.
Exactly. Just to give 2 points on this, you're confused. The first case, right, is that so I have, one, I do bitul on an isur. It happened. It was mivutal, and then I add more of the same isur. Right, it has to be the same. This actually gets in the nosei kelim bring this in. It has to be the same tam. Then it's choser v'ner. The isur comes back, and so the thing, even though the thing is batel, it always has like an asterisk by it of saying, yeah, but there is this piece of pork juice in here. So if you get more pork juice, you have to do bitul on both the drops of pork juice, not just on one. We're not going to have time to do this, but the ber hetev, or it's really the shach, brings up that he actually thinks there is a case in yavesh be'yavesh and min b'mino. And dabat ben time that there might be in hefsed meruba you can be matir in this case, right? It's like a pretty extreme case, but he's like, in that one case I'm willing to be lenient. But the case of where you drop the one zait of chalav into water and it's batel, and then it falls into meat, and there's not enough meat to be batel the chalav, but it was already batel in the mind. Why isn't that obvious? And so the Beheratev quotes the Shach here, but the Shach says we have a general principle that there in heterim there isn't bitul, right? And so you may have said, right, that what's the havamina? You may have said, well, that's nice. The milk dropped into the water. It's milchik water now. It doesn't matter if there's 60. It doesn't matter if there's 300 against it, right? There's no bitul in heterim when everything is mutar. And so you may have taken that lechumra and said, yeah, and therefore if I then drop that water into meat, I have trouble. And he says that's the reason the Ramah has to point this out to you. So, but Alana, you have a look on your face. I'm sorry to call you out for this. Either that made a lot of sense or that didn't make a lot of sense. I'm not sure.
No. I was just thinking about it. It's okay. The idea of not being able to batal heter is very interesting. That's all.
Yeah, usually that's lakula, right? Like we don't think of heter in that way, but
it doesn't need to be bataled.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that's why you may have done it. All right, we have 3 minutes, so I want to do the last seif here, if that's okay, just so we can go over it. Im nivla, this is Zayin, Sif Zayin in Tzaditet. Im nivla isur mu'at letoch kli kasher. All right. Im darko shelo kli lishtamesh bo b'shefa heter. Mutar lishtamesh bo lechatchila. So I have a little bit of isur that gets absorbed by a pot, in which I usually, when I use the pot, I don't just fry a little bit of oil and onions in it, but I fill the thing up with soup every time, right? Then I'm allowed to reuse that pot, right? Because it was only a little bit of isur that dropped into it, and right, it will never come to netinat tam, right? Because I always fill up that pot completely, and there's only a little bit of isur that's balu in it. All right. Ulafichach isur mashu shenivla b'ktira ubetoch kankanim v'chetze bahem mutar lishtamesh bo lechatchila. Right. So therefore, if I drop a little bit of isur into, various vessels, right, don't worry, don't you have to kasher the vessel, or maybe it's not a kasherable vessel even, you're allowed to use it, right, as long as those things are used for a lot, with a lot of stuff in them. Even that same day, because you're never going to come to netinat tam. You know that in this thing. But if I do it in something that, where I sometimes only cook a little bit of stuff in it, right? Here, I think he's talking about like a frying pan when he says kara, right? You know, you can imagine that I fry up some onions in this pan. I use a little bit of oil, a little bit of onions. It is, you know, I'm not guaranteed that I'm actually going to have the tam of the isur that got absorbed will never reappear. All right, right? I can't even then use it with a lot of stuff in the thing. Because I might come to use it only with a little stuff. All right. So this is on one hand a very big kula, right? If you accidentally, you know, drop a little bit of isur on your heating, you know, your cooking vessel, and you know that you always use a lot against that every time you use the vessel, you don't have to worry about it so much. But if you sometimes don't use it that way, then there is a worry. So if I remember correctly, there's a opinion in Rishonim that actually says that even if you sometimes use it for a little, if you majority of the time don't, it might be okay. But I'll have to look back.
Such a relief not to see a Rama at the end of this.
I know you expect the Rama to come in here and be like, what just happened, Mechaber? It's yeah, we never do this, but yeah. Well, in fairness, I think this all shows up some other place as well. So there might be a Rama there, and I didn't check. That could be why. So, all right. Any final questions or thoughts? In some ways, some of this is prep for next week. So I appreciate your I don't know what the right word is here, but your willingness to go along with that, and we're getting review ahead of time. It's you know, who said that things have to go, you know, from earlier time to later time? I don't know. It's Yavni, you're a physicist. You can tell us about it. It's
only with collective behavior.
Oh, there we go. So, all right, everyone, have a great Shabbos, and I will see you next week, God willing. So,
Shabbat shalom. Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.